NBA fans, we're back with another installment of Top 5 Greatest Players in its franchise's history. This one is the Top 5 All-Time Indiana Pacers. And after this one, we're going to do the Los Angeles Clippers and then the Los Angeles Lakers. So stay tuned for that. So without any further ado, let's get into it. For the Indiana Pacers, kind of an interesting history. Most of their, spoiler alert, 3 of their top 5 all-time came during the early 70s when they were in the ABA and won a couple championships. And then you guys probably have an idea of who one of the other is, and there's another closer to our time. But there's also a few honorable mentions. Let's start with some honorable mentions. Pacers all-time honorable mentions. We're going to start with Lance Stephenson, who was a contributing factor to the Pacers in the early 2010s. When they were in the mix in the East, they got to the conference finals in 2013 and 2014 against the Heat. You know, they were a good team, not a great team, but Lance Stephenson was one of the better players on that team. And certainly played a role in the Pacers' rebuild post-Reggie Miller when they were in contention. And another, speaking of Lance Stephenson, another honorable mention is Paul George. Now, some of you might have George as one of your top 5 Pacers. I got him as an honorable mention because I got, looks like one of those all-time great shooters in there. 3 guys from that big 3 in the ABA years that won a couple championship, and a guy from the 2000s. But Paul George is an honorable mention because he started to rise. His road to superstardom, which I consider more of an all-star than a superstar, but his peak started with the Pacers. We remember him there. They got close a couple times, and Paul George was a vital part of that. Out of all the teams he's played for, we remember him most for being associated with the Indiana Pacers, so that's why I include him as an honorable mention for his work there. And last but not least, we're going with Rik Smits. He was a center during the Reggie Miller years, the number 2 guy behind him. Played a role in the Pacers being in contention throughout the 90s. Not a great player, but a good player for the Pacers, and certainly worthy of an honorable mention. Now on to the top 5. Starting with number 5, we're going to go with Jermaine O'Neal. You guys remember him from the 2000s. Now, he started off in that 96 draft class. He was a Blazer, but then when he came over to the Pacers, he played a role in them getting to the conference finals in 2004, when they lost to the eventual champion Detroit Pistons. He played a role in them still being in the mix in the East the next couple of years throughout like 2005, 2006-ish range. And he made the All-Star every season he was with the Pacers. So certainly worthy of an all-time Indiana Pacer. And one of the more underrated centers in NBA history. Because he certainly played a key role in them being in contention in those years right in the late Reggie Miller years. Even staying in contention and in the playoff mix the first couple years after his retirement. So certainly, one of those underrated all-time centers. Not an all-time great, but pretty underrated and good for his era, especially for the Indiana Pacers. So that's him at number 5. Now we get to, it's going to be 3 straight guys from the ABA Pacers, big 3 that won championships in the 70s. Starting number 4, George McGinnis. Now he was a multi-time All-Star, part of those back-to-back championship teams as part of a big 3. Now he averaged 29.8 and 13. You're in 12.3 throughout his career in that role. And he was a contributing factor along with that big 3, which if you guys aren't familiar with it, you'll know who those 2 guys are when I talk about it next. But, one of those, but he contributed to 2 championship teams, contributed to their greatest era throughout their franchise's history. Certainly a big factor in each of those championships. Certainly worthy of a nod. And he was a 2-time All-Star, I believe. But now, moving on to number 3. That's Roger Brown. He was a 4-time All-Star, big man that helped that Pacers team win a championship. Now he had more longevity, more All-Star appearances on that team. But Roger Brown's a guy that a lot of you might not know about, but he played a significant role in those Indiana Pacers championships teams. He's inducted into the Hall of Fame and Basketball Hall of Fame in 2013, and a unanimous all-time ABA selection, part of 2 championship teams. Certainly worthy of being acknowledged. Or 3 championships, actually. Not 2, I stand corrected, over 10,000 career points. Now number 2 is going to be Mel Daniels. He was part of those 3 championships, a 7-time All-Star throughout his career. Mel Daniels was the other piece of this Pacers' big three teams that dominated the ABA in the early 70s, and he was inducted a year before Roger Brown. Mel Daniels was inducted in the 2012 Basketball Hall of Fame. You know, three-time ABA champion. He was also a two-time ABA MVP as well. And certainly the best of the three from that big three that won those championships. And I did consider putting him number one, but I'm going to have to go with someone who had more longevity with the Pacers. And that was Reggie Miller, who at one point in time held the record for most three-point shots made. He was the Mr. Three-Point Shot era of the Jordan era. And now the Pacers didn't win any championships during that era, but to be fair to the three I just listed off, you know, starting Mel Daniels, Roger Brown, and George McGinnis, they played during the 70s in the ABA where there was less teams and the competition. No offense to those three guys, but the competition was weaker in that era where they won those three championships. I'll go with Reggie Miller, who kept the Pacers in contention during what's considered the best era in the NBA history. And plus, he had the longevity. He was with the Pacers from mid-'80s till the mid-2000s. He had a lengthy 20-year career. And, he's, former, like I said, countless time All-Star, helped lead the Pacers to a finals in 2000, was the lead guy behind that, helped lead them to that famous victory over the Knicks in the playoffs where, remember, Spike Lee was in the crowd and Reggie Miller does this as a mocking taunt. Remember, the Pacers beat the Knicks in 2000 to get to the NBA Finals? He helped the Pacers have Ewing and the Knicks number. Now, unfortunately, their kryptonite was Michael Jordan, but hey, it happens. But Reggie Miller, I'd say for longevity purposes and the fact that it happened during the strongest era of the NBA, I consider Reggie Miller my all-time great Pacer. That's my list there. You guys can comment. Let me know who your top 5 Pacers of all time are. If you want to throw honorable mentions, you're more than welcome to in the comments. And make sure to drop a like, subscribe for more NBA-related content. Coming up next in this series, we'll do the top 5 Los Angeles Clippers of all time. So stay tuned.